Alright, so let's just jump into it. I put the car in the lift, I'm starting to take off all the wheels. First thing I like to do is remove the nuts on the rear axles, get those off as soon as possible. Sometimes you have to have the car on the ground so the weight of the car won't allow the axle to actually spin if your e-brake isn't good enough. Luckily, my e-brake was good enough here and I could just use the impact gun to release these nuts. Next, I got on top of the car and I use a turkey baster and remove all the brake fluid from the reservoir. This way, so when I remove the brakes, all the brake fluid doesn't drip onto the floor. Next, I'm going to start removing the front brakes here, and I take off the anti-rattle clip and remove the 2 pins in the back to remove the caliper. After I remove the caliper, I start removing all the sensors that are connected to the strut. Next, I go and try to remove the caliper bracket. This is where I start to begin to find out that all the bolts are a lot more rusted than I thought. And right here, I'm having to use a breaker bar actually to even get these things off. Alright, so a small update, what's going on. I started taking all the front suspension and brakes off. These hard lines are like just impossible right now, just a ton of rust. So I'm gonna soak these like 17 times and then overnight. Hopefully that works. Otherwise I'll need to use some heat. And then I started coming around to the suspension here and all the suspension bolts as well are just rusted as crap. So I think I just need to like take the night off, just let everything just soak in PB Blaster and stuff like that, so we can hopefully get these going in the morning. But yeah, I mean, German bolts, right? I don't know how you guys do it in Europe, but everything's just rusted. So it'll be good when everything's off and I can replace it with all new bolts and nuts and new hardware. But for right now, I mean, we just have to, just let them soak in PB Blaster because it's just too tough. I'm just gonna strip everything. So that's where I'm at. But I think I'll lift the car up and try to get the exhaust off. At least get something done more than, what I have right now. While all these other bolts are soaking in PB Blaster, let's get the exhaust off, get the heat shields off. That shouldn't be a big problem. And then maybe the drive shaft or something like that. So let's get to it. All right, now I'm starting to remove the exhaust. Luckily these weren't rusted at all, so they came off really easy. Next, I'm going to remove the middle support here. These actually ended up being more rusted than I thought as well, which is why I'm having to use a breaker bar here. Just go slow so you don't snap them. Come to the back now where I can remove the exhaust hangers. And the whole exhaust comes down. Next I move on to the exhaust heat shield, which is a bunch of 10mm bolts, and it comes right off. Now I'm going to lower the car and start to drain all the coolant. Now that the coolant is drained, I'm going to work my way around the car and remove the rest of the brakes. Alright, so I just wanted to show you a quick tip. I was able to loosen these pins for the caliper with the socket and ratchet, but I couldn't go that far out because the ratchet ended up hitting the shock here. What you're gonna have to do is you can take off your socket here and you can use a ratcheting wrench and you can put it up into there. That's gonna give you more clearance, and you can actually ratchet that pin out then, and you have plenty of clearance to remove it. So just a little tip if you're in tight spaces. It's not necessarily just here. I've done this in the engine bay and other places on the car too. It's just a quick and easy little way to do it, so hope that helps. Okay, now we start to remove the drive shaft. When I do this, I like to hold the e-brake and put the transmission in third gear. I found that this gear helps prevent the transmission from spinning the most. I'll go ahead and loosen the 2 bolts I can on the front of the drive shaft, and then I'll move to the back of the drive shaft connecting to the differential. I'll get all those loose and then go back to the top of the car, release the e-brake, put it back in neutral, and then spin the drive shaft so I can access the other bolts. I'll then lock the drive shaft again and remove the rest of the bolts. Once you get the 2 13mm nuts for the center support bearing, the drive shaft should pull right out. Alright, so that's a wrap for this video. We got all the brakes off, the front suspension off, exhaust, drive shaft, and the coolant blade. So we're really just preparing to drop the engine with the whole front subframe and the control arms and everything all together. I think going forward, I'm probably going to cut out a lot of the just removal. You guys have probably done this a million times. Unless there's some sort of trick that I find that would be interesting, I'm just gonna blow by this stuff. I don't want to just have all these videos of just me removing components. I don't think that's very fun to watch, right? So I want to get to the engine stuff. I want to get to the new suspension stuff and everything else we have going on. So I think that will be a lot more enjoyable to watch. And then in the next video, we'll start disconnecting everything on the engine and getting that ready to go. So I appreciate you watching. Please subscribe. It's gonna be a fun series once we start building everything up. And I'm really excited. So thanks. Cheers.